So I want you to imagine a stage performer, but not just any performer. Imagine a guy who hauls around this massive 20-piece one-man band that he literally built from scratch.
Oh, wow.
Right? And he spends his nights performing in these just sweaty, crowded Munich beer halls. And then I want you to imagine that this exact same beer hall clown somehow, and honestly kind of accidentally, helps birth one of the 20th century's most important theatrical movements.
All just by telling a simple joke, right?
Exactly. A totally off-the-cuff joke about scared soldiers. So welcome to the deep dive. Today we have a really fascinating stack of historical texts on Karl Valentin. He was a Bavarian comedian who lived from 1882 to 1948.
Yeah, and during his peak, people actually called him the Charlie Chaplin of Germany, which is a massive title.
It is, but his influence went so much deeper than just, silent comedy. Our mission today for this deep dive is to figure out exactly how a guy who started out just sweeping up sawdust as a carpenter's apprentice evolved into this towering cultural figure.
A figure that they literally called a linguistic anarchist.
Yes. And his highly specific, really obsessive brand of gallows humor, it didn't just entertain the masses in Weimar Germany. It actively shaped the minds of massive cultural giants. We're talking people like Bertolt Brecht, Samuel Beckett, and just generations of comedians who followed.
And I think this is incredibly relevant for you listening right now. I mean, think about the sheer volume of content you scroll through on a daily basis.
It's endless.
Right, and most of it is totally disposable. It's a quick laugh, and then you just forget it forever. But Valentin's comedy was totally different. It was architectural.
Architectural. I like that.
Yeah, because he proved that the silliest, most ridiculous misunderstandings, the kind we usually just brush off, can actually be constructed to reveal the deepest, darkest truths about the society we live in.
I love that. So to figure out how he built this legacy, we really need to look at how he literally built his life. Looking at the biographical sources we gathered, he was born Valentin Ludwig Fay in Munich in 1882.
Right, into a pretty standard middle-class family.
Yeah, his father actually had a partnership in a furniture transport business. But the detail that really sticks out to me in these texts is his very first job. Before he ever even hit a stage, he was a carpenter's apprentice.
Which is honestly the skeleton key to understanding his entire career.
Really?
Oh, yeah. That carpentry background is the foundational blueprint for his comedy.
Wait, I'm going to need you to connect those dots for me. Because on the surface, learning how to make tables and chairs seems like a completely different universe from, writing jokes for a cabaret crowd. Like, how does woodworking translate to comedy?
It translates entirely through the concept of precision and physical control. Think about it. When you understand exactly how a chair is constructed, like where the weight goes, how the joints fit together, you also understand exactly how to make it fall apart.
Oh, that is so true.
Right? Slapstick comedy, especially the kind Valentin performed, isn't just randomly tripping over your own feet. It is precision engineering. You have to know the absolute physical limits of your environment.
So he wasn't just like writing funny lines on a piece of paper.
Exactly. He literally constructed the physical world of his comedy. He built his own sets. He engineered his own props.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. I imagine it's kind of like modern indie filmmakers who don't just write a script, but also, build the sets, sew the costumes, wire the lighting themselves. It's total world building.
That's a perfect analogy.
But he obviously didn't stay in the woodshop forever. The sources show he started his comic career around 1902, and he spent just 3 months at a Munich variety school under a guy named Hermann Strebel.
Right, a very short stint.
Yeah, and then he landed his first gig at the Zeughaus in Nuremberg.
But it was basically a false start, because shortly after he began performing, his father actually died.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and Valentin actually stepped away from the stage entirely for 3 full years.
3 years? I mean, 3 years is a lifetime in the entertainment business. That could have been the end of the story right there.
It really could have been. But that break served as this massive incubation period for him. He didn't just sit idle. The texts say he took musical studies, learning the guitar from Heinrich Albert.
Right.
And tapping right back into that builder's mindset we just talked about. He engineered this massive 20-piece one-man band.
Okay, hold on. Let's just visualize that for a second. Because a 20-piece band strapped to one human being is insane. We're talking what? Cymbals between the knees, bass drums hooked up to foot pedals.
Strings attached to elbows, harmonicas on a neck rack, all of it.
The sheer mechanical complexity of keeping 20 instruments in time without just collapsing into a pile of noise is staggering to me. And he actually took that massive contraption and toured with it in 1906.
He did. And think about what that says about his personality as an artist.
Oh, for sure.
Operating a 20-piece band all by yourself is the ultimate expression of control. He didn't want to rely on a drummer who might miss a beat, or a trumpet player who might show up late,
Yeah, he wanted absolute, meticulous control over his physical and auditory environment.
Exactly. And that obsessive need for control perfectly set the stage for how he would eventually manipulate language, the flow of his sketches, and ultimately his performing partners.
Right. And that transition from controlling physical objects to controlling people and words brings us to his big breakthrough in the Munich cabarets and beer halls. He becomes a regular in these venues, and what I really love is that he didn't try to polish himself up.
No, not at all.
He wasn't aiming for the high society theater crowd. He really leaned into a strong working-class Bavarian dialect. But more importantly, he wasn't a one-man band anymore, because he found his ultimate foil in his female stage partner, Liesel Karlstadt.
And you really, really cannot talk about Karl Valentin without talking about Liesel Karlstadt.
She was huge for his career, right?
Absolutely. She was the anchor that allowed his comedy to just float up into the stratosphere.
The physical dynamic between them must have been incredible to watch. The historical texts mention that she would often physically pad her clothing out to look much larger than him, and she would speak in this incredibly deep, booming bass voice. She usually played the role of his overbearing employer or some kind of rigid authority figure.
Right, so you have Valentin, who is this very lanky, awkward string bean of a guy playing the rebellious, confused employee.
And Karlstadt just looming over him like a brick wall.
Exactly. It's the classic clown dynamic. But he applied it to the anxieties of the modern working world. And this dynamic allowed Valentin to develop a performance style that brushed up against some major artistic movements of the time.
Like what?
Well, the sources link his work to Dadaism, social expressionism, and the Neue Sachlichkeit, which translates to new objectivity.
Okay, time out. You're dropping some heavy art history terms on me.
Oh, I know.
New objectivity, Dadaism. What does that actually look like in the context of a guy arguing with his fake boss in a smoky Munich beer hall?
That is a fair question. Let's break that down for the listener.
So Dadaism was an art movement that essentially embraced total absurdity and nonsense as a direct reaction to the horrors of World War I. Like, if the real world didn't make sense anymore, why should art?
Exactly that.
Yeah.
And new objectivity, on the other hand, was about stripping away all the romantic, heroic fluff of the past and looking at the cold, hard, stark reality of everyday life.
Got it.
So, when you put those two concepts together in a beer hall, you get Valentin. He would present these stark, totally everyday situations, like buying a train ticket or following a work order, and then he'd push them until they collapsed into total absurdity.
Which perfectly explains why the texts refer to him as a linguistic anarchist.
Yes.
The mechanics of his sketches are just so brilliant to me. The way they describe it in the sources, a scene would start with a tiny, almost invisible misunderstanding, like a word that has two different meanings.
Right.
But instead of just correcting the mistake and moving on like a normal person, Valentin would latch on to that misunderstanding and stubbornly insist upon it. He would defend the literal meaning of the word until the entire sketch derailed around him, and Karlstadt was basically pulling her hair out.
It's the absolute weaponization of logic. I mean, he would follow a rule so literally that the rule itself would break.
It makes me think of modern internet humor.
Oh, totally.
You see this constantly in absurdist sketch comedy today, or even just in chaotic comment threads online. Someone takes a common phrase completely literally, and they absolutely refuse to break character.
Yeah, they just double down.
They just ride this tiny semantic error into catastrophic absurdity. And the humor comes from their utter refusal to just act normal.
It is the exact same mechanism. And notice who he chose to target with this linguistic anarchy.
Right.
He wasn't generally going after kings or presidents or massive political figures.
Right.
His sketches parodied what we might call the small cogs of the societal machine.
Yeah.
Shopkeepers, firemen, orchestra musicians, petty bureaucrats.
But why focus on the small cogs? I mean, why not go after the people at the very top of the food chain?
Because the small cogs are the ones who actually enforce the rigid rules of everyday life.
Ah, I see.
Right. A petty bureaucrat or a shopkeeper usually doesn't have the power to change the rules. Their entire identity is built on enforcing them unquestioningly.
That makes total sense.
So when Valentin's linguistic anarchist character collides with a rigid rule follower over a simple misunderstanding, It exposes how incredibly fragile the whole system is. He showed that society is basically just held together by people agreeing not to ask too many questions.
Wow. And when you start asking those questions, the comedy gets very dark, very fast. The texts actually compare him to Karl Kraus, calling Valentin a master of gallows humor.
Laughing when things are incredibly bleak.
Exactly.
And this leads us to a concept that perfectly captures the mood of 1920s Berlin and Munich cabarets. It's an Italian term adopted by critics called the risata verde, or the green laugh.
The green laugh, I mean, that sounds almost slightly sickening. What does that actually mean?
It's a bit sickening, yeah. The green laugh refers to a specific kind of grotesque satire. It happens when an artist makes you laugh about a topic that is so dramatically heavy, so unfixable, that you are laughing simply because there is absolutely no other solution.
Jeez.
It's not a joyful laugh at all. It's the laugh of someone trapped in a burning building who suddenly realizes they forgot to lock the front door.
Oh my gosh, what an image.
Right. It's born out of a total lack of options.
Wow. Laughing because the only other option is to scream. That paints such a vivid picture of the Weimar Republic era.
It really does.
You have the society caught between world wars, dealing with massive hyperinflation, political street violence, deep instability. And here is Karl Valentin standing on a stage in a beer hall, stubbornly arguing with Liesel Karlstadt over a derailed misunderstanding.
Yeah.
He wasn't telling jokes about the economy. He was acting out the feeling of a world that had completely lost its mind.
Precisely. He was acting out the psychological reality of his audience. And this unvarnished, stark presentation of reality didn't just annoy his stage bosses. It caught the eye of serious intellectuals who were desperate to strip the fake glamour out of theater.
Which leads us directly to the most incredible crossover of Valentin's life, his relationship with Bertolt Brecht.
Yes.
For anyone listening who might just know the name, Brecht is one of the most towering figures in modern theatrical history. He's this brilliant, highly serious theoretician and playwright. And yet the texts say Brecht was regularly hanging out in these smoky Munich beer halls, obsessively watching Karl Valentin perform his clown routines.
Brecht actually compared Valentin directly to Charlie Chaplin. But what Brecht really admired was Valentin's virtually complete rejection of what Brecht called cheap psychology.
Okay, by cheap psychology, do you mean overacting, like forcing the audience to feel sad by crying heavily on stage?
Yes, exactly. The melodrama, the kind of acting where the performer is essentially begging the audience for sympathy.
Right.
Valentin never did that. He was like the carpenter examining a piece of wood. He just presented the stark reality of the situation, no matter how absurd it was, and let the audience deal with the discomfort.
And Brecht didn't just sit in the audience taking notes, did he? He actively brought Valentin into his world. In 1922, Brecht appears in a photo of Valentin's spoof of the Munich Oktoberfest.
That's right.
Brecht also added a review called Die Rotzibi to the premiere of his own play, Trommeln in der Nacht, which translates to Drums in the Night, and he specifically featured a performance by Valentin and Karlstadt in it.
But their defining collaboration came the following year. In 1923, they made a 30-minute slapstick film together titled Mysteries of a Barber Shop.
I looked into this film from our sources, and the amount of Weimar-era talent in this single room is just staggering.
Oh, it's unbelievable.
Brecht wrote the script. You have Valentin and Karlstadt starring, and the cast includes Max Schreck.
The same Max Schreck who played the iconic, terrifying vampire in Nosferatu.
Exactly. It's like the Avengers of 1920s German avant-garde art making a slapstick comedy about a barbershop.
And while the film didn't get an immediate wide release at the time, history has really caught up with it. Today, it is widely recognized by critics and historians as one of the 100 most important films in the history of German cinema.
That's amazing.
It is. It's a perfect visual time capsule of that green laugh aesthetic we were talking about.
But as amazing as a top 100 film is, there is a tiny behind-the-scenes anecdote between Brecht and Valentin that I think is the most mind-blowing detail in this entire deep dive.
Oh, I know exactly what you're going to say.
Because it quite literally changed the course of theater history forever.
This is a legendary moment. So at the time, Brecht was producing his very first play as a director, a production of Edward II. And in this play, there is a massive 30-minute battle scene.
Right. So imagine the situation. Brecht, this genius architect of theatrical theory, is totally stuck. He doesn't know how to stage this massive battle. And the sheer irony here is that Brecht has to turn to a guy who used to play a 20-piece one-man band in a beer hall to figure out how human beings actually behave under extreme pressure.
It's so poetic. So Brecht walks up to Valentin and literally asks him, What are the soldiers like in battle? He's looking for some profound psychological insight.
Yeah, some deep philosophical answers.
Exactly. And Valentin, without hesitating for a second, answers, they're pale, scared shitless.
Pale, scared shitless. It's so brilliant because it completely bypasses all the heroic, chest-thumping acting techniques that were popular at the time. He doesn't say they are brave or angry or even crying.
No.
He gives a purely physiological, objective answer.
It is the ultimate rejection of that cheap psychology. And Brecht took this observation completely literally. Based on Valentin's blunt answer, Brecht instructed his makeup team to apply white chalk to the faces of his actors. He wanted them to look visibly, physically terrified, totally drained of blood.
And the texts explicitly point out that this specific anecdote, this application of white chalk based on a comedian's offhand joke, is where Brecht located the very germ of his conception of epic theater.
Yep.
For context, for the listener, epic theater is a movement that changed everything. It's all about distancing the audience, making them think critically about the mechanics of society rather than just getting lost in an emotional illusion. And the seed of that entire movement started because a cabaret clown objectively observed that terrified soldiers simply lose the color in their faces.
Because when someone observes reality with that much precision and builds their comedy with the meticulousness of a master carpenter, their work doesn't just vanish when they leave the stage.
Which brings us to the aftermath. Valentin died in 1948 in Planegg from pneumonia. And usually the challenge with cabaret performers is that their art is so fleeting.
Very true.
It happens live in a smoky room, maybe you capture a few grainy recordings and then it's gone.
That is the fate of almost every stage performer of that era. But Valentin's cultural weight was so immense that scholars treated his work with a reverence usually reserved for classical literature.
Yeah, the sources talk about a massive collection.
Right. His work was compiled into an 8-volume set of complete works, edited by Helmut Bachmeier and Manfred Faust.
I really want to emphasize how rare that is. To understand his impact, think about your absolute favorite stand-up comedian today.
Okay.
It is almost unthinkable for a modern comedian to get an 8-volume, academic-level, complete works published. We aren't just talking about a book of his best transcribed jokes here.
No, not at all.
This set archives his solo scenes, his dialogues, his couplets. They dedicated entire volumes to his personal letters and his autobiographical writings. They treated this linguistic anarchist with the same historical gravity you would give to someone like Shakespeare or Goethe.
Because to his fans and the culture at large, he wasn't just performing skits, he was articulating an entire philosophy.
Philosophy.
Right. Yeah, a comprehensive, deeply moral worldview told through wordplay and semantic collapse.
And his physical legacy in his hometown of Munich is just as tangible. In 1959, based on a private initiative, the Valentin Museum was established in the Absurdist in Munich. But it isn't just a boring collection of dusty playbills. The texts note that it specifically houses absurdities from his legacy. It's literally a museum dedicated to nonsense.
Which is the most fitting tribute possible.
Truly.
There is also a statue of Valentin, located in Munich's Viktualienmarkt. And one of the most poignant details from the sources is that even today, people still come and place flowers on this statue.
It shows a very deep, lasting affection from the public. But his influence didn't just stay trapped in Bavaria, did it?
Not at all. His humor translated across cultural boundaries in some really fascinating ways. For example, in 1986, there was a Turkish musical play titled Geçinden Tramvay Geçen Şarkı, which translates to The Song Through Which a Streetcar Passes.
Okay.
Yeah, it was written by Ferhan Şensoy, and it is a piece loosely based on the life and comedic spirit of Karl Valentin.
That is the ultimate proof of universality right there. When a Turkish playwright in the 1980s is heavily inspired by a Bavarian beer hall clown from the 1920s, you know that the core truth of his work transcended time, language, and geography.
Absolutely.
Because the frustration of dealing with a petty bureaucrat, the chaos of a simple misunderstanding spiraling completely out of control, the feeling of the green laugh when the world feels too heavy, those aren't German experiences. Those are universally human experiences.
Valentin just happened to be the expert craftsman who built the perfect comedic structures to house them.
So to bring this all together for you listening, we started with a carpenter's apprentice, a guy who knew how to put wood and metal together so well that he literally built his own 20-piece one-man band.
Yeah.
He took that obsession with physical control into the beer halls and became a linguistic anarchist, stubbornly annoying his stage bosses with perfectly engineered semantic misunderstandings. And through that fierce dedication to stark, unromantic reality, he became the unlikely muse who accidentally gave Bertolt Brecht the keys to modern theater just by observing the pale face of a soldier.
We've talked a lot today about how Valentin used his own body, his own props, and his own highly controlled language to expose the absurdities of the society around him.
Right.
And it makes you wonder, as we move into an era where artificial intelligence is increasingly generating our text, writing our scripts, and standardizing the rules of our language, what happens to the linguistic anarchist today?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Right. When the machine starts writing the rules of communication, who is going to be left to misunderstand them on purpose?
Man, that is a lot to think about. Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the extraordinary life of Karl Valentin. Keep questioning the seemingly simple things in life, and we'll see you next time.